About the theory or practice, activities, anything is fine, I guess. Or if you want to have a discussion, hi, please.
When do you teach, at what stage do you teach Roman letters? Romaji?
Romaji. We don't teach Romaji as such. Well, the normal elementary school education, they teach, I think, in fourth grade, I think they teach Romaji. In NESEP, we teach the A, B, C from first grade. We teach Komoji from first grade. But we don't teach the writing or really until third grade. But we try to introduce them to it in first grade. Like in first grade, we would do basically maybe like letter shapes with the hands, like A, B, C, D, learning how to do words like letters like that. Or we teach alphabet songs, but I like to make sure that they always have the alphabet written on the board so they can see the letters as they're singing the song. They don't necessarily have to be able to read the letters, but if you're up here pointing to the letters as the song goes on, then some of that seeps in, I think. Unlike with second grade, we still don't really teach writing, but we might have them make letters with their bodies, YMCA or something. And like using the coloring sheets to where they have to find the B's, then they would do that. Another thing I do is like maybe magic finger, which is like you draw the letter on the board or have a big cardboard cutout or something, and you get everybody to ready their magic finger and you make a sound and make a big deal of it and trace the letter. They all have to trace the letter in the air. We really enjoy that. You can also, if you want, you can make the letter sound. Like if you're teaching A, you go as they're drawing it, and that sort of plays into that. Or you could just make any kind of sound. Because the goal is just to get them sort of familiar with the written letters. At third grade, we start the phonics, so then we would start with things like being able to write the letters, being able to read the letters, and understand them, and get it all together. Any other questions? Yes?
You started your talk by clarifying the differences between mother tongue acquisition and foreign language learning.
Yeah.
But you focused on the results, research results, based on the experiments done in the L1 acquisition.
Yes. And
you gave the impression that synthetic phonics is more effective than analytic or even whole language approach. But you applied kind of automatically or unconsciously applied the results to the foreign language situation, and it cannot be taken at its face value unless you have substantial experimental results.
No, I agree. That's a valid point. It's a very valid point. Well, there's a couple reasons why I think it is applicable. And there's a couple problems, of course, with it too. Is that, well, there just isn't the body of research in second language environment on synthetic phonics. There just isn't a sequential, actually synthetic phonics program out there that's researchable yet. NESEP is starting to get into to develop that more, but until it's sort of moved on and we've had a chance to do some research, it's hard to provide research backup. Conceptually, I think theoretically we can apply it. The reasons being that whereas whole phonics or analytic phonics can work in a native speaking environment as well as synthetic phonics, I think that of the three methods out there, the one that fits the capabilities of our students is probably closest to synthetic phonics. The reason being that studies on whole language, just the whole language in L1 or L2, show that they need a lot of exposure to the language. And the main advantage of this is that in a short amount of time, in sequenced, isolated bits, it's easier. And the reason being is because the learning process isn't focused on necessarily immersion. The process is on learning certain rules in a sequence that build together that they can construct. And I don't think that there's anything that would say that a foreign language that the way that we would construct a foreign language is so fundamentally different from the first language that we couldn't benefit from the same rules. And I know a lot of this is based on my own personal observation in the classroom, which isn't, of course, the scientific, academic, authoritative thing that we would hope it could be, but preliminary results at least seem to have mimicked a lot of the results from the L1. As far as changes in motivation, capability, the fact that children are able to decipher words that they haven't been taught, the fact that we've seen children take this and start to be able to read words that I haven't even introduced in the readers in class, that they've brought them to me and shown them to me, and I've seen this as student-generated interest, not things that have been directed in the class, which is something very different to before we implemented these techniques. So there is a change, and I do believe that if there was proper research done on it, that they would validate this. But I admit that there has not been sufficient research done to say this is 100% authoritative. No, I'll agree with that, and that's a serious concern. Are there any other questions?
I have a question.
Oh, yes.
I own my small library school, and I'm teaching a basic phonics to my students. And the maximum number of students in my class is like 6 to 8. But even in such a small class, there's a big gap between students who can acquire the basic phonics very easily and be able to read and enjoy reading. But some students have very difficulty.
Let's see. How old are the students?
It varies.
It's difficult when you have when you only have a small group of very different age.
In one cluster, age group is very similar.
Oh, okay.
So I assume that because you're teaching at elementary school, the number of the kids in one class is much bigger than the class I have.
Yeah, I think my biggest class is like 35 students.
35.
My smallest class is 15, depending on the school.
So there was a bigger gap.
The gap is actually, teaching this method, it's smaller than you would expect. There's only maybe a couple students, maybe 1 or 2 in any given class that have real difficulty. And even they can get used to it. They just need more special one-on-one attention. But there's only children who are just refused to even, I've only had 1 student out of all my students, and like this year I'm teaching like 150 I think, but 1 student who just refuses to even practice the sound or to try to memorize it all. He just has nothing to do with it. And of course he's not moving forward at all. Everybody else is. And so I don't have any like failures who can't read to some extent. Of course, comprehension stuff and grammatical acquisition is a different issue, but they're able to move through it, and I think the main thing is being able to give them those sequential bits and using it. Like the reader, working through readers is really important, because if they just learn a sound, or just learn to read isolated words, or just read an isolated sentence, it's not engaging to them. They don't have a communicative reason to worry about reading. But if they have like a story, something that they need to get involved in, then I think that is an extra motivation for them to try to get through it.